Hello, and welcome back. This is going to be another video in the Let's Talk About Death series. And what I'm thinking is probably as good a place to start as any while I'm staring up at a beautiful full moon in Gemini. Or at least the probably now waning side of it. Is kind of the topic of what is death? And I'll probably bring this up again when I talk about how to talk to your kids about death, but this is something. It's funny. I'm just going to keep saying this through these videos. There's no roadmap. And I've been thinking about how to try to do this in like a right way. It's not there. So, forgive me for moments of thinking about it. What I'm thinking about is my experiences with death in my life. I've had a couple of near-death experiences myself. I've had more pets and animals that I've been with when they died. Which is still, to be with a living being when the soul leaves the body, as my youngest has been calling it, and I love saying it that way. When the soul leaves the body, or when the soul leaves this vessel, and there's just such a difference between a vessel or a body with life in it, with energy in it, with soul, with spirit in it, right? And there's a difference when it's gone. And much can be said the same can be said of humans, of our human beings. And there's so many different thoughts about what death is, what it means. And there was a couple of experiences about, I want to say 9 or 10 years ago, where we lost a family pet. And my oldest son was very young at the time. And so this was it wasn't my first experience with death. But it was his. And to be honest, I can't really recall anybody really sitting with me when I was younger and various deaths happened and saying, like, this is what death is, or this is what we believe or don't believe it. It's generally kind of been open, but there wasn't exactly direction. I know I was a question asker, but I also tried to be a good girl, and I can remember that it was a better idea to be quiet when funerals happened and things like that. And I kind of had I won't say a strange response, but I've had more, I think, emotional attachment more often to losing a pet than I have to losing an animal companion than to losing a person. Probably more the connection of, our pets, our animal companions are like our children. And I don't really recall anybody like explaining it. And I don't fault anybody either. I just don't recall it. So when it came time to explain that to my oldest son when he was very young, I was trying to figure out, how do you do that? Okay, let's see. And my DM, as much as I love him, was not exactly. He was already dealing with his own anxieties of stuff, and I kind of recognized that, and I didn't want to put a lot on him, and I wanted to find some way to talk about it without overdoing it. My oldest was around 6 at the time, so it was, okay, how much information do I give, how not, and how do we talk about it? And I just decided that I would ask him what he knew about death. Like, let's just talk about it. And and his first response, which was similar to my youngest son, who is now 9, was, I don't know. I don't really know. I kind of expected that they would talk a little more about stuff they saw in the movies, but if you think about it, there are not there's movies that talk about what happened after you die, but there aren't like a ton of them that really touch on that. It's usually a quick moment in a movie, right? And we hadn't really had other experiences in it, and so then I said, well, would you like to know what other people think? And I offered some different options in a age-appropriate level, like the Buddhists think that we reincarnate until we achieve a certain amount of learning that we wanted to, and then we move on to nirvana, which can be related to like a heaven-like place for Christians, and many Christians believe in a heaven and hell sort of scenario. And then A lot of pagans, which is part of my own traditions, we believe in versions of reincarnation. And there's often Summerlands, which is kind of a waypoint to view your past lives and future lives or decide to go on to something else. Um, there's atheists often believe that nothing happens, you just die, right? And then agnostics are often, they believe that something happens and that there is a higher power or order to the universe, but they're not sure what. And it's hard because I can think of so many other spiritual ways of thinking about it or scientific ways of thinking about it. But when you're talking to kids or even other adults, you don't want to overwhelm with too many options. Um, if you feel called to it, I definitely recommend, look into what the many worldviews are about death, like what happens to us. There was even a scientist who studied the weight difference in the human body from when we are alive just before death, before the soul leaves the body, and just after. It's a fascinating study. And I mean, the real truth is we won't know until we go. We can and I think the fun of life is that you get to choose. And I really like associating with like Abraham Hicks in terms of you choose your reality. And what feels good in your heart is right. It doesn't matter if it matches what anybody else says or not. If it feels right to you, it is right. And for me, I mean, I'd rather pick something that feels right to my heart. And I really like, especially, I like a combination between old Celtic views about reincarnation, which in a lot of it's funny, a lot of the documented stuff from Alexander the Great and the Caesars talked about like the Pict people and the Celtics and the Gallics were some of the bravest warriors ever, and even the women battled, and they believed that a lot of why was because of their beliefs in reincarnation, that they would be born into an even better life for like which is kind of there's views of karma in there too, that they would be born into an even better life in the next life for fighting for their families and their homelands and things like that. And I think that sounds kind and brave, and I just like it. I also like many indigenous views of our ancestors being around, and it's funny because